He was just the man behind the shed. No one knew his name. No one asked. He fixed sprinklers that weren't his problem, moved trash bins before anyone noticed, and when the school bus broke down that cold morning, he stepped forward, silently, efficiently, invisibly, until the principal saw what was tucked inside his coat pocket, a pair of dog tags, and with them, a name the Pentagon once erased. This isn't just a story about a man fixing an engine. It's about what happens when we finally see the heroes we've ignored. Have you ever passed someone who looked forgotten, but carried something deeper? Drop a comment with the name of a veteran you believe deserves to be remembered. Subscribe to Unsung Valor Stories so we can keep sharing the lives of the quiet ones who served without asking for applause. Because some stories don't need to be loud, they just need to be heard. The first thing most people noticed that morning wasn't the biting cold, or the way the sunrise smeared pink across the Ridgeview High School parking lot. It was the silence. Bus 17, usually the loudest, oldest, and slowest on the lot, had died. The engine refused to start. Its groan turned into a hiss, then into stillness. The driver, Maria Lopez, popped the hood and stared blankly into the smoke. Overheated. Maybe worse, she muttered, already fishing for her phone to call dispatch. A group of students stood nearby, wrapped in hoodies and groggy complaints. The janitor shrugged, muttering something about coolant lines. The head of campus security, Mr. Keller, stepped over with one hand on his belt like he was patrolling a military base. And from behind the old metal maintenance shed, the one students always joked was haunted, someone moved. He stepped out quietly, as if he knew he wasn't welcome. No one knew his name. They just called him Ghost. He'd been seen sleeping behind the dumpster, near the broken bleachers, sometimes folding up a ragged tarp before the sun came up. He never begged, never spoke, just existed like fog on the edge of everyone's vision. Except now, he was walking toward the broken-down bus. He wore a battered army green coat, frayed at the cuffs, black boots with soles too thin for the cold. His face was leathery, sharp-eyed. He looked to be in his late 60s, maybe older. His hands were rough and stained. He didn't speak, didn't smile. He just walked straight to the bus. "Excuse me, sir," Keller said, stepping in front of him. "This is school property. You need to leave." But Ghost didn't even blink. He made a small gesture to Maria, a polite nod, a silent request. She hesitated. "Wait," she said to Keller. "Let's just see." Ghost reached into his coat and pulled out an old multi-tool, the metal dull from use. Without a word, he leaned into the engine bay and started adjusting wires, tightening clamps. His hands moved fast but steady, as if they remembered what his body had long tried to forget. No one spoke. 2 minutes passed. Then, the engine clicked. A cough, a whir. It roared to life like it had been sleeping, not broken. The students gasped. Maria blinked. Even Keller stepped back. "How did he?" the janitor whispered. The kids began clapping. One girl pulled out her phone. "That was insane," she muttered. But Keller wasn't impressed. "You can't just walk in and touch school property," he barked, reaching for his radio. "I'm calling the precinct." "For what?" Maria said, stepping between them. "He fixed it. No one else could." "He's trespassing," Keller snapped. The old man said nothing. He simply wiped his hands on a faded rag, tucked the multi-tool back into his coat, and turned to walk away. That's when Principal Dana Holloway arrived. She was coming out to check on the delay when she saw the crowd, the bus running, and a man who didn't belong. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Bus wouldn't start. This man fixed it," Maria said, pointing. Dana squinted. Her eyes landed on the figure walking away, and then on something swinging loosely from his coat pocket. Dog tags. She stepped forward. "Sir, wait." He paused, turned halfway. Dana took a cautious step closer. "Can I see those?" she asked, her voice softer now. The old man hesitated. Then he slowly pulled them from his pocket. Dana took them gently. Her eyes scanned the metal. Then they widened. SGT, Joseph M. Keller. SFG Delta, Operation Nightfire. Her breath caught. That name. That operation. She remembered it. From a classified military leadership seminar she attended years ago. Joseph Keller was not a rumor. He was a ghost, but not the kind they joked about. He was one of the men who'd vanished from the records. A special forces soldier tied to an off-the-books operation in hostile territory, the kind the Pentagon never acknowledged in public. And he was standing here, grease on his fingers, fixing school buses. Principal Dana Holloway stood frozen, the dog tags in her hand gleaming faintly in the morning sun. She'd held identical tags once, decades ago. During a briefing she wasn't even cleared to be in, a Pentagon aide had handed her a redacted case file for training purposes. Inside, one name had survived the blackout ink: Joseph M. Keller, Operation Nightfire. Status: unconfirmed, presumed KIA. And yet, here he was, standing in her school parking lot, covered in grease, holding a mop handle. "Sir," she said again, quietly now. "Where did you serve?" Joseph tilted his head. His voice, when it came, was gravel and restraint. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," Dana said. "And it will matter to everyone in this building once they know who you are." "I'm nobody now," he replied and turned to leave. "Wait." Dana stepped forward. "At least come inside, please." Joseph paused. Something in her tone shifted his weight. Not pity, not charity, recognition. He followed her into the building. The front office fell silent as they passed. Mrs. Aldridge, the secretary who once complained about that strange man behind the dumpster, stared wide-eyed. In Dana's office, Joseph sat carefully in the chair like it might collapse. He kept his eyes low. His hands were calloused, nails clean, despite the grime. Dana sat across from him, still holding the dog tags. "I looked you up once. Nightfire. You weren't supposed to exist." Joseph smirked, just a little. "We weren't supposed to come back either." "What happened?" she asked. He stared out the window for a long time. "They sent us in through Laos. No flag, no patch, just black fatigues and orders not to die. Intel said it was a weapons handoff. It was a setup. We got ambushed by 2 units, 1 local militia, 1 foreign contract. Lost half the team in the first 10 minutes. Dana listened, not blinking. I carried my commander for 3 miles, bled through the jungle with a shrapnel chunk in my ribs. Made it to the evac site a day later." He shook his head slowly. "When the bird came, they looked at us like ghosts, told us the mission never happened. So they buried your name. They buried all of us. We were transferred, disappeared. We got paid in silence." Donna set the tags gently on her desk. "Why here, Mr. Keller? Why behind Ridgeview High?" He looked at her. There was no sadness in his eyes, just calm honesty. "Because schools have broken things. Leaky pipes, jammed boilers, flickering lights, things I can fix." Dana swallowed hard. "And because," he added, "kids don't shoot at you." Word of the incident with the bus began to spread fast. Students whispered in the halls. Someone had filmed part of it, not the repair, but the dog tags. It was grainy, but the words were visible. That afternoon, the video hit social media. The caption read, "Wait, are janitors a war hero?" The comments exploded. "That name's in a declassified file on Reddit. Nightfire? No way. We owe this man an apology. I thought he was just the guy who stacked cones after PE." The next day, Principal Dana called a special staff meeting. She stood at the front of the faculty lounge, holding a copy of the video frame. "I need you all to know something. The man some of us ignored, even reported as a nuisance, is a decorated Special Forces veteran. The military once called him expendable. We will not make that same mistake." The teachers sat in stunned silence. "I've invited him to attend our Veterans Assembly this Friday," she added. He declined. A few heads nodded in quiet understanding. "But I think," she continued, "he deserves more than a few minutes at a podium." That Friday, the students filed into the gym like every other year. Flags, a slideshow, a polite performance. But this time, something changed. When the speaker called out local veteran names, a ripple moved through the crowd. And when she said, "Please rise if you are currently serving or have served," no one expected Joseph Keller to walk in through the side door. He wore his old boots, his gray coat, his dog tags tucked away. He stood beside the bleachers, not on stage. But when students saw him, they began rising. Not just standing, saluting, clapping. It started small. One kid, then another, until the gym was roaring. Joseph said nothing. He just nodded once, eyes steady, shoulders square, and when he turned to leave, students stepped out of the way like a procession, parting in silence. On Monday morning, Joseph Keller was gone again. Not a trace behind the maintenance shed, no crumpled tarp, no coffee cup, no rustling sounds in the early cold. He had disappeared the way ghosts do, quiet, clean, and unnoticed by most, but not by Jackson Meyer. Jackson was a junior, smart, sarcastic, usually glued to his phone. But since the assembly on Friday, something had shifted. He hadn't taken his eyes off Mr. Keller the whole time the gym had erupted into applause, because when Joseph had walked in, Jackson had seen his grandfather's face again. His grandfather, Staff Sergeant Alan Meyer, had served with a unit that never talked much about where they went or what they did. He used to tap his finger on the table when things got too loud. He couldn't handle fireworks. And when he died, all Jackson had left was a shadow of a man and a box of folded flags. But Joseph Keller? He was real. Still walking, still silent, still... Here. So Jackson did something. He grabbed his two closest friends, both in AV Club, and asked them to meet him in the front hall before school started. "We're building something," he said. "Not for grades, not for credit. For him." "For the janitor?" one of them asked, uncertain. "For the man who fixed more than an engine last week," Jackson said. "Just trust me." By third period, word had spread. Students peeked through the front lobby windows to see what looked like a table being built at the far end of the main hallway. Not a lunch table, not a display board, a tribute, a long wooden table, refinished overnight by someone's dad, now stood beneath the school's mission statement mural. It was simple, polished. On top sat a framed photo of Joseph, snapped from the viral video, a folded American flag, a pair of unused work gloves, and, placed gently in the center, a printed plaque. It read, "For the man who served twice, once in silence, once where we finally heard him." By lunch, the school was buzzing. In the teacher's lounge, Coach Mitchell stared at the live stream and muttered, "When do we start letting kids take over the building?" Across the room, Ms. Dwyer sipped her coffee and said without looking up, "Probably around the time we stopped doing anything worth following." At the end of the day, Principal Holloway walked down the main hall with a copy of the morning paper in her hand. The headline, "The Ghost Who Fixed a Bus and Broke the Internet." The article was respectful, almost reverent. There were still no details about Operation Nightfire, but former service members were quoted confirming the name Keller. One even wrote in, "I served in that zone. I know who he is. If he's alive, honor him." Donna stopped at the tribute table. A sticky note had been left by one of the freshmen. "Thank you for the engine, but more for the reminder. Rachel P. 9th. She smiled. That night, long after lights out, Jackson walked back through the school fence. He wasn't alone. His mother had helped him get in touch with a veterans group. They had tracked down a mobile outreach coordinator who knew where Joseph sometimes slept, under the train overpass on the edge of town. Jackson had left a note with food and one sentence, "We didn't clap because we felt sorry. We clapped because we finally saw you." He didn't know if Keller would come, but around 10:30 p.m., as Jackson stood beside the tribute table, doing a final polish on the wood, he heard the front door click open. Bootsteps. Steady, slow. He turned. Joseph stood in the dim hallway light, still wearing the same coat, the same boots, but his posture was different. Not straighter, just seen. "Built this for me?" Joseph asked, voice low. "No," Jackson said, setting down the cloth. "We built it for who you are, and for all the people we ignored, just like you." Joseph looked at the table. His eyes lingered on the folded flag, the gloves. He stepped forward and placed his hand gently on the wood. His thumb brushed the edge of the plaque. "I didn't want this," he said. Jackson nodded. "I know, but thank you," Joseph whispered. And then, something no one had expected. He reached into his coat and took out a small, crumpled patch. Dark fabric, worn at the edges, barely visible. It was the insignia of Task Unit Nightfire, a logo long since classified and erased. He set it down beside the gloves. "I don't know how long I'll be around," Joseph said, "but this, let it stay." It started with a phone call. At 9:12 a.m. on Tuesday, Principal Dana Holloway was summoned to a compliance meeting with the Ridgeview School District's executive board. No agenda, just a polite bring your full notes regarding the recent campus incident. She knew what this meant. By 11:30 a.m., 4 men and 1 woman in crisp navy suits had arrived at Ridgeview High. Their badges bore the seal of the district, but their eyes carried something colder: damage control. They didn't knock when they entered her office. "Principal Holloway," said the lead man, a sharp-chinned bureaucrat named Gresham. "We're here to discuss this situation involving the unauthorized individual currently on school grounds." Dana didn't flinch. "He's not on the grounds anymore." "Good," said the woman beside him. "We've had several calls, some from parents, some from former military. Seems there's confusion about who this man is and what role he plays here." Gresham folded his arms. "There's also the matter of liability. Your students built a display, unsanctioned, involving an individual with no employment, no background check, and no affiliation with the school system." Dana set her pen down. "With respect," she said carefully, "the students built a table. They didn't build a false narrative. Mr. Keller's credentials are real. I've spoken to multiple veterans who confirmed his unit." "That's not the issue," Gresham replied. "The issue is optics. We have national attention. There's a story circulating that your school endorsed a homeless man, handed him a platform, and failed to vet him." Dana leaned forward. "Are you asking me to tear down a student-led tribute to a war hero?" There was silence. "We're asking you," Gresham said finally, "to consider the precedent." That afternoon, students gathered near the tribute table. Word had spread that the board was coming for the wall. Jackson stood by the edge, arms crossed, glaring at anyone who so much as touched the velvet rope they'd strung around the display. The plaque remained. The gloves, the folded flag, and the patch, the insignia of Task Unit Nightfire, still sat untouched in the center. Joseph was nowhere to be seen, until he was. He walked in from the back hallway, unnoticed at first. Same boots, same coat. His presence silenced the crowd like a flip switch. Then Dana appeared, her face unreadable. She walked straight to the table and placed a frame beside the flag. Inside the frame, a printed letter, signed by the Department of Defense, dated 12 years ago. Subject: Service Recognition. Joseph M. Keller, retired. The letter was heavily redacted, but one line was clear. Though operations remain sealed under federal classification, the department acknowledges and honors Sergeant Keller's extraordinary contributions in theaters of conflict deemed essential to national security. Dana turned to the crowd. "Mr. Keller has asked for nothing, but we refuse to give him less than he's earned." She looked to Jackson, then to the others. "This table stays, not because the board permits it, but because the truth doesn't need permission." Applause erupted. For the first time in the school's history, the students led the standing ovation. That night, Joseph sat in the back of the auto shop across town, sipping weak coffee from a metal cup. Dana sat across from him, coat still on. "I assume you had that letter all along," she said. Joseph shrugged. "Didn't see a reason to wave it around. I fix things, not talk about 'em." She smiled. "You fixed more than the engine, you know." He looked away. "I didn't want to come back. This world, it got fast, loud, disconnected. You made it stop," she said, "even if just for a few days." 2 weeks later, the school installed a permanent glass case in the hallway. Inside, the gloves, the folded flag, the insignia, and a new bronze plaque. This one said, "In honor of Sergeant Joseph M. Keller, who served twice, once in silence, once where it was finally heard." Joseph didn't attend the ceremony. He was last seen walking near the train tracks, coat zipped high, thermos in hand. But every Thursday morning, like clockwork, a janitor would find the flag case freshly polished, a new white rag folded neatly beneath it, and tucked just behind the display, a coffee-stained note that simply read, "Still running." He never asked for thanks. He never told his story, but one broken engine, one pair of dog tags, and one student who looked a little closer were enough to pull a forgotten hero back into the light. His war ended decades ago, but his story, It finally found its home.